If you are seeing this video, that means I may or may not be taking a hiatus from overall content creation for the channel due to a death in my family. I will do my best to get this out before I take the hiatus, if not after. And I thank you all for your understanding for this decision during this difficult time. Hey guys, Wolvie here. This is a double movie review for the channel. Now we're going to be going to two movies that I actually saw in the cinema this past Sunday. If you're kind of wondering about my right index finger, it was a bit of a cooking accident from a couple of days ago. So it's just like, it's a bit of like a minor burn, that sort of thing, so don't really worry about it. So that's all good. So anyway, for this double movie review, it's going to be Godzilla vs. Kong, as well as the new Mortal Kombat movie. So, like I said, I saw these back to back on Sunday. It's my only day off from work for the time being. So basically, you guys know the drill when it comes to my movie reviews. I go over whatever I can, being as spoiler free as possible. And I'm going to be giving off two reviews, not two reviews, two scores. One of them being the intended fan score, and then the other score is going to be my personal score, meaning that, hey, I make these videos, and the usual disclaimer, any opinion in this video is my opinion only. So we're going to go off with Godzilla vs. Kong, and I'm going to move certain things around so you guys don't really get to see too much. So, with that, this is probably going to be the best way I'm going to be doing this one. But yeah, this is my ticket stub for Godzilla vs. Kong. Now, the thing here with this particular movie, Godzilla, Kong, they have their issues with each other. And the thing is with this particular movie is like there's a lot of POV switches. And POV, for those of you who may not be familiar with the acronym, it's point of view. I mean, it's like, you have this person's point of view, you have that person's point of view, you have some other person's point of view. So you have quite a bit going on, but the way they pulled off the point of view switch, to make sure certain things are consistent with the plot itself, that was flawlessly done. Because you're talking about the cast they have for this one. It's like, okay, what's going on here? This makes a little bit of sense to this bit. That makes sense to that bit, etc., etc. And it's just like, wow. I mean, I'm surprised, for a movie that's not 2 hours long, they were able to pull off the point of view switch really well. And the way they got to the point of the film was exquisitely done. Because for those of you who may remember Batman vs. Superman, it's about 3 hours, maybe more. It's just like the way, Batman and Superman did. And now that I think about it, it's just like, it just dragged on too long, and longer than it needed to be. And Godzilla vs. Kong made up for that in significant ways, Get to the damn point, as well as the point of view switches were spot on. It was just really good how they pulled that off in less than 2 hours. Now, the one thing that kind of concerned me here is just like with Godzilla vs. Kong, and this has the same issue with films like Avatar and Alita, is that it's like, where do you want to go to see it? How do you want to see it? Because in the present times, it's like you can actually stream movies. You have to pay up something to stream it from home. And I mean, I kind of was talking to one of my roommates about this. So this is kind of somewhat of a confirmed source. It's like, you really can't enjoy certain aspects of Godzilla vs. Kong if you were streaming it from home. Meaning that you actually had to go out to the cinema to get a much better experience. And that's the problem Godzilla vs. Kong has. Is that if you want the most ideal experience to see this movie, you actually want to go to the cinema, make sure you have your face covering on, 6 feet, social distancing, all that stuff. you want to go to the cinema and see it there instead. Because there's certain aspects to Godzilla vs. Kong where you simply cannot get it from streaming it at home. You actually have to go out the house, apartment, wherever, and go see it at a cinema. Because there are certain things you can't experience at home, you're able to at the cinema. And sometimes I just wish it wasn't the case. Now, I say it like that on purpose because, there are people, who can get the cinema experience at home, but you have to spend so much money for that replication. And again, we're in the middle of an ongoing pandemic. Is it really worth it? Because, people may not have the money to pull it off. So on that, overall, Godzilla vs. Kong, if you can actually afford to go to the cinema, get like a popcorn and a beverage, to enjoy it like that, that's just something I urge people to do that way if you can afford to do so. So, to do a quick recap for Godzilla vs. Kong, the intended fan score is going to be a 10 out of 10. But my personal score is actually going to be an 8.5 out of 10. The biggest points that I have to take away from this is the simple fact that you actually have to go out of the house to the cinema in order to experience it in the most ideal way possible. Because if you're trying to stream this at home, there are certain aspects to Godzilla vs. Kong that, unfortunately, you won't be able to experience that at home because you have to go out of the house to the cinema to experience that without spending an obscene amount of money for it. So that's it on that. So to do a super quick recap for Godzilla vs. Kong, my personal score is going to be an 8.5 out of 10, as well as the intended score being 10 out of 10. And the reason why it's 8.5 on my personal score is because you actually have to go out of the house to get the best version of this, and that is going out of the house to the cinema to see it, because streaming it at home won't do the same. Now, we're going to jump right into the new Mortal Kombat film. Now, this one I actually have to be hold on a second. Okay. I was trying to do something here, and I was trying to maneuver the camera. Yeah, let me double check something. Okay, good. I'm still recording. So basically with Mortal Kombat, let me get this video to where I can actually see the poster here. Now the photography here, I actually took this picture, so little FYI. And this is when I was ready to leave the cinema for the night. So basically for this particular Mortal Kombat film, and I was kind of hinted at this before I saw this, and it's something I can 100% confirm. The lore for the new Mortal Kombat film is 100% different from the original Mortal Kombat and Mortal Kombat Annihilation. So it's one of those things is where, and I was talking to some of the drivers I work with at my job, is that you want to watch this at your own risk. Now, it's not a bad way I'm saying it, but it really depends on certain factors, and that could be not so good of a thing depending on how your taste is in the cinema. Now, for this particular one, like I said, I actually had to keep this one as spoiler-free as possible because there's quite a bit to dig into it, if that makes any sense. But for the thing is with Mortal Kombat, the newer version, is just again, like I said, the lore of this particular one is completely different from what we were used to with Mortal Kombat and Mortal Kombat Annihilation in the 1990s. And what do I mean by that? Now, Mortal Kombat, the 2021, is more or less an origin story of sorts, because you don't have people facing off against each other in Mortal Kombat, that sort of thing. So much of an origin story. Now, you see here in this poster, you kind of caught on a hint as to the origin story of who I was referring to. Scorpion and Sub-Zero. being that they're kind of a bigger deal here than in the other two movies, because Mortal Kombat and Mortal Kombat Annihilation, it was Liu Kang who was pretty much the focus of it, because if you look at the first 4 Mortal Kombat games, it was actually Liu Kang who was the main person. And this is a spoiler for the games, at the start of Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance, Liu Kang actually dies at the beginning, like screenshots of Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance, and I believe the focus shifts into Kung Lao. So it's one of those things where it's like, again, for this particular movie, the lore is like a complete, like, different direction. Now, the question is, do I feel it pulled it off really well? Yes and no. Now, the reason why it's both a yes and no to that question is because when it comes down to, like, the gore, the violence in the new Mortal Kombat movie, they actually stayed more true to the source material, being the video games. Because we all know that Mortal Kombat is known to have some gory stuff in it. And if you look at some of the more recent Mortal Kombat games, that actually is the case. So kudos to the filmmakers for making the fight scenes here more true to the games we consider the source material. Now, with that being said, remember why I said it was an origin story? I felt was too much of an origin story. Because again, you don't really have, like, the tournament itself. And this will depend on the individual stance in regards of, is it something worth overlooking? And unfortunately for me, there are some parts of it, it being too much of an origin story. Some of it I'm able to ignore, but I'm also unable to ignore at the same time in certain other aspects. Because, I really can't do too much of a spoiler, but it's like, there's a certain marking that some of the people have. And it's one of those things that's like, I was looking at some of it, I'm thinking, I don't know if that was a good call, or this was a good call, that sort of thing. That's what I felt. And in addition, it's just like, you have deaths of, like, some of the characters, which you don't really see much of in some of the original films alongside the game. So it's like, it's a complete, 180, if you will. Now, there were some people who already saw it before I did, and they were like, and the reviews were kind of mixed. So it's one of those things that's like, granted, it's number 1 at the box office, but it's just like you really can't, let me rephrase it. I think it comes down to what is one willing to ignore and what you cannot ignore. And because of that aspect alone, this is where I felt parts of the storyline to Mortal Kombat 2021 fell flat. Now, this does have a chance of redemption in future Mortal Kombat films if it gets to that point. Because if you look at, like, certain things like the ending to this particular film, it's like, there's more to come. And I do hope that what's to come can actually make up for the fact that parts of the storyline just fell flat, in my personal opinion. So it's one of those things that's just like, and what I'm going to say, it works both ways. It's like, what you're willing to ignore, what you're not willing to ignore, and the fight scenes, it's themselves. It's like, it's the questions you constantly have to ask yourself. Now, for the main character, it's a brand new character, like, we've never heard of in the games or in the first 2 movies. So it's like, it's one of those things, it's like, it was a bit of a ballsy move, I felt, by having a completely different character, original to the entire, like, lore. Now, As to how I think about the main character who was like original and new to the entire franchise, I'm like, that was quite well done on an overall scale. I mean, there are a few things here and there I'm kind of like scratching my head at, but it's just like that's something I'm actually am able to overlook, and that's an example of like what you're willing to overlook, what you simply cannot ignore. So with that, I'm going to check my time real quick. Okay, so I'm actually doing a little bit of I'm actually going a bit longer, but there's 2 movies, that sort of thing. So for the intended score, this is actually going to be a 10 out of 10. Now my personal score, and a couple of the main things here is like some parts of the storyline, I simply was not moved. And there were a few things here and there I simply could not ignore, overall. I mean, most of it's good, some of it's bad. So with that, I'm actually going to give this an 8 out of 10. Now, like I said, some of the stuff I could not ignore involves the storyline, because when it comes to a good movie, if I'm crying at certain parts of it, you'll know I really enjoyed it. And unfortunately, part of the story peaked within the first 10 minutes of the film. And it's just like, I'm like, in some cases, that's really sad. But it's one of those things, it's just like, certain ways things are tied together. It's actually not that bad. But if you look at the storyline, like part of the thing here, it's like what makes a good movie, a really good movie, is if you are moved to tears at a couple of points. And I have to say, I was not crying at all during this movie. So it's like, if I'm not crying, it's just like, it could mean a few things. It's like, I didn't enjoy it as much, or there could have been more that could have been added. And unfortunately, that's something I didn't see. Now, granted, like Godzilla vs. Kong, if you see this in the cinema, it's like, you're actually going to get a better experience. But this is one of those films where, and this is where this takes the cake over Godzilla in this lone regard, you actually can't stream this at home and get something really good out of it. So it's one of those things, it's like, yeah. But like I said, there are quite a few things like in the storyline I simply could not ignore. Some of it bad, but most of it good. That's the biggest reason why I had to take some points away. And the fact that it felt like too much of an origin story, the same issue with the story. Some of it I can overlook, some of it I could not. And the one thing that really does save this movie is that the fight scenes stay true to the source material, that being the video games. Now, the reason why I gave Godzilla vs. Kong here a slightly bigger score is because, you know what? I was actually in tears at varying points. This is something I thoroughly enjoyed a little bit more than Mortal Kombat 2021. Now, Mortal Kombat 2021, like I said, it does have a bit of a redeeming factor, like the capabilities for the second film. It comes down to how well it's executed with, more characters coming along and the proper tournament. So, with that, I am done with this particular video, but before I sign off, like I said, I have a hiatus coming up, like, in a few weeks, where I'm going to be taking a couple of weeks off to do some more memorial planning for my mother. I'm probably going to be doing another one in August because I'm going to be traveling out of state. There might be a third hiatus coming in January, but it is going to be a wait and see on other factors. Again, when it comes to memorial planning, getting a lawyer set up, it's just going to be quite draining. It's going to be, I don't know when I'm going to be able to go back to this, more often. But if I have to speculate on certain things, it's probably not going to be for another year at the very minimum, because it's like things can happen and I may be forced to take a hiatuses to really plan things out and go from there. So, with that, I don't know when I'm going to be doing another movie review next. And like I said, I like I said, I give Godzilla vs. Kong my personal score of 8.5 out of 10, with Mortal Kombat 2021 an 8 out of 10. And the reasons, I had to do a bit of a quick recap here for Godzilla versus Kong is because the main thing is, where you want to go to get the best experience. For Mortal Kombat 2021, the reason being that there are some issues with the storyline. It's a matter of what you're willing to ignore versus what you cannot ignore. Alongside Mortal Kombat 2021 being more of an origin story as opposed to as a revamp. It comes down to what you're willing to ignore, what you can't ignore. It's on individual interpretation. So with that, I am done with this video. With Wolvie here, signing off. I will catch you all on the flip side.